it starts in 12:30. I couldn't believe it. I completely.
Ready here?
Ready.
It feels like I still need to be waiting for the empty seat. Oh. Or can we be? Okay, welcome everyone. Bob is in Italy, so I am filling in for my first meeting as vice chairperson, so bear with me. Today is May 2nd. This is the Camden Select Board meeting. As always, we are streaming on YouTube and also on Zoom. If you wish to make a comment or follow along on Zoom, you can go to the town website and click on the calendar, and then the Zoom link should be right there. The audio is slightly better on YouTube, so if you just want to listen, you may find that experience is slightly better. We will begin with public comment on non-agenda items. There anything? Okay, great. Yep, come on up, state your name, and just a reminder, the board has a best practice policy where we are not supposed to respond in any way, just for the people that may have interest in the topic and didn't see it on the agenda. So just because we don't respond doesn't mean we're not interested. Just
Okay.
Trying to follow the rules.
Okay, great. So my name's A.B. Winkelhofer and my husband Toby. We own Lake City Floats, which provides float service to over 160 customers in Camden, Almagunacook Lake, the river, and Norton's Pond in Lincolnville. The mismanagement of the dam after this most recent event caused a lot of damage to property as well as wildlife. The loons' nests were drowned. The infrastructure of the shoreline was damaged, causing abutment failures where people's floats connect to shore. Just to mention a little bit of damage. Also, all the floats that we had already set up picked up their moorings and floated off, causing the ramps to fall into the water. This now consists of a new abutment setup and or build for our customers. This was a huge loss that was preventable by lowering the water level before the rain event. We do understand that 6 inches was not predicted, but 3 to 4 was predicted a week ago. We'd like to know how the town plans on preventing this in the future. We've been running this business for 4 years, and since the control of the dams changed hands, we've had nothing but trouble with high and low water levels. This has never been the case for over the last 20 years. We can't run our business with such inconsistent water levels. I can't, it seems as if maybe there's a hidden agenda between the dams and the water levels. This has set us back, and as of right now, we won't have our parking lot for the townspeople to use come Memorial Day. This is a concern for us as business owners and our customers. We want to be able to continue providing this service as it has been for over the last 40 years, but we need to know sort of where we're going in the future with the dam and, who's going to be in charge of it and how it's going to be run differently than it has been run recently. So that's it. So you guys don't comment at all on anything I said. So do we get feedback in an email? Do we get anything?
If you write an email, if you write an email to the select board and the town manager, someone will reply from the town office. Is that correct? Somebody will?
It is hard to get responses sometimes from the town. So I don't know, maybe if I include some of you folks, that would make it a little easier.
Yes, please
I
do.
think you'll find that it's definitely the lake level policy is something that needs to be revisited. And as a board, we plan to talk, soon about what that process might be. But it's been a long time since that policy has been looked at, and I'd sit here and talk about it all day with you if I could. But definitely something that needs to be talked about and
revisited and changed probably.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
okay. All right. Well, I'll be sending an email out to some of you then we can discuss. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Anything else for comments on items not on the agenda? Okay, then. Moving on to our second item, which is approval of minutes from March 7th, March 21st, and April 18th. Any comments?
I move that we approve the minutes from March 7th, 21st, and you're saying April 18th is on there as well? It's not in
Did
my
we already
packet.
approve those?
I think that
We had already
Yeah,
done the
that was
18th. We only need to do the 7th and the 21st.
That's right. So
because
March
the
si-
18th was already approved.
I move that we approve the minutes of March 7th and March 21st.
Right.
It cannot have been already approved.
We
got that email from Janice
March
today.
21st is how far we're going back tonight.
But April
March-
Let me just look to see what's in the packet. I believe it's just the 7th and the 21st.
Yes, but
Correct.
But then Janice sent the April 18th, right?
I
No, so
believe
No.
she said that that would be removed and it would just be the 7th.
7/21st.
And the
Okay.
21st, which is in the packet. Those
Okay.
only two things are in the packet, so those are the only ones that I'm comfortable.
Yep,
Yeah, that's
very
fine.
good. Is
I'm-
that your motion
I
for the
mo-
two of
yes,
those?
I did.
Great.
I'll second.
All in favor? 4-0. Okay, next on the agenda are public hearings. We have a number of items. The way this happens is that any members of the public who wish to speak on the topic will get a chance. The board will listen, and then we'll close the public portion of the hearing, and the board will deliberate. At that point, only if there's a majority vote by the board will we reopen public comment to clarify things that have already been said. Starting with the application of Meanwhile LLC doing business as Paper Plane at 1 Wayfair Drive. Do we have anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public portion and go to board deliberations.
I move that we approve the application for a liquor license for Meanwhile LLC DBA Paper Plane.
Second.
All those in favor?
My-
4-0. Next, moving on to the application of Norumbega Hospitality Corporation, doing business as the Norumbega Inn at 63 High Street for the renewal of a Class 5 bed and breakfast liquor license. Anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll go to board deliberations.
I move that we approve the application of Norumbega Hospitality for a bed and breakfast liquor license. For liquor license, sorry.
Second.
All those in favor? 4-0. Item C, the application of High Tide Inn at 505 Belfast Road for a new hotel Class 1 liquor license, new owners. Do we have anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Audrey, I assume you're monitoring Zoom for any? Okay. Nobody from the public. I'll close the public portion and go to board deliberations.
I make a motion that we approve High Tide Inn's application for a liquor license.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Motion passes 4-0. And finally, the application of William Stats doing business as,
La Cave.
okay, thank you, Sophie.
I'm finally useful.
At 7 Public Landing for a new special amusement permit. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I will go to board deliberations.
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve La Cave's application for a special amusement permit.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda, which, am I supposed to read all of the items? Or
I think it's good form. It's good. It's up to
just
you.
for anybody that's listening? Okay, so the consent agenda includes 4 items. First, there's a memo in the packet. The approval of the closure of Atlantic Avenue for the following events: Harbor Arts and Book Weekends, which is July 7th to the 9th, and September 29th to October 1st. Item B, designation of Registrar of Voters office hours for the upcoming June 14th, 2022 annual town meeting.
Allison, you have an older copy of the agenda.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
Audrey printed me this copy. Here, I've got it on my, is the one,
Go to B. On page 1.
okay. Oh, I see. Sorry, Stephanie. So item B is actually the approval for the Camden Area Business Group to hold their annual sidewalk sale on May 19th through the 21st as part of Business is Blooming in downtown Camden. Item C, approval of Vittler and lodging licenses for May for Camden Cone, Camden Whitehall Inn, Mixed Greens, and the Waterfront Restaurant. Item D, the proclamation designating Saturday, May 20th, 2023 as Arbor Day in Camden, which is part of our Tree City commitment. E is the designation of Registrar of Voters office hours for the upcoming June 13th, 2023 annual town meeting. And finally, F, the countersignature of the annual town meeting warrant for the 5-town community school district budget referendum and MSAD 28 budget referendum. Are there any objections to anything on the consent agenda or anybody wishing to speak about one of the things?
So I just have one question. So Stephanie, you're on the board of Camden Business Area. And I mean, I have no problem voting on the consent agenda, knowing that Stephanie's on the board. But does it pose a problem to her to approve the consent agenda?
I have actually pulled that up on a number of different things in the past, as such as the Christmas by the Sea,
Yeah.
and a few other things, and there hasn't ever been a issue, and that was going to be something that I brought up. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, because I mean, personally, it doesn't, and I have a question for you actually. As the organizer, I read the application. I would have loved more information on.
This is just something
Oh,
that
Perfect. Voila.
I think
Excellent.
actually then we should pull that
Why
out of the
don't we
consent agenda.
remove that from, and
We can have
go
a
ahead with the
discussion.
We'll move the rest of the consent agenda as consented to
Yeah.
and deal with this item separately. Do we want an introduction, Eric,
But
and Stephanie? can-
one other thing that I wanted to say is E, that needs to be June 14th, 2023.
Can you confirm or deny that, Audra?
The
That's-
13th is the
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
We're voting on the Tuesday, right?
Do I also have
Have an old
another-
agenda.
This is the one that I opened from the town website.
Oh,
so-
are you looking at the memo?
I just got this from the town website also, but, oh no, yeah, no, the one Audra printed off for me was, so it's June 13th, 2023 is accurate?
Yes.
So we're going to remove item B, is that correct, from the consent agenda
Yes.
to an action item?
Yes.
Okay, so consent agenda is approved, or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Okay,
Should we address item B now?
sure. And I think we have, like Stephanie said, I think we have dealt with this before. It's a volunteer position.
Yeah, no, it's not a conflict of interest, but I felt it was weird in the consent agenda to have it looped in.
I mean, sometimes people like to have things outside of the consent agenda, so there's an opportunity to present about them and
Also-
promote and,
Because I wanted
Most of the things that happen in the town like this have been approved in the consent agenda.
yeah, I think it just depends on how much time we have and
I was
I don't
curious.
see anything odd about it, but I would love to hear more if Eric wants to give a little overview. Welcome.
I'm on the packet.
Sounds good. I don't have to move this.
It says June
My name is Eric Anderson. I am the board chair for the Camden Area Business Group. Here speaking on behalf of our request for approval for sidewalk sales for the third weekend in May for Camden is Blooming, which will be our 11th inaugural year. Doing what was in the previously known as Business is Blooming has taken shape as Camden is Blooming for the past seven seasons, I do believe. Has been a unanimous support. It's Camden's only sidewalk sale historically. So if there's anything I can improve on the application process, that's the first year I've seen the application process come back to me from Janice. So I put it together as best of our knowledge of what had been approved in the past. So please let me know if there's anything that I can further elaborate on or anything. But speaking of the weekend, it would begin on sidewalk sales in general would begin on the 19th of May, which is a Friday. They run Saturday and Sunday. It's a great opportunity for businesses to get old inventory out in room and make space for items new, to get locals coming from the greater Midcoast area into Camden. So it's really a way of Camden Area Business Group making the season start a little bit earlier in a different shape or form, not necessarily bringing heads and beds for hotels, but for shopkeepers and restaurants. Traditionally, that's also when you see a lot of schooners go sailing as well. So we're really kind of, Camden's unraveled, it's unwrapped, it's ready to roll for the season. So what we found as a board was really neat when we were putting this together. There's a lot of other things happening that weekend. So we get to wrap it all in as one and market it as one. So Thursday, that May 18th, starts the first Camden Art Walk, which will be held on Bayview Street. The 20th of May is a festival of poetry, which is quite nice. And then the West Bay Rotary has moved their duck derby to Sunday, the 21st. So that entire weekend, you've got things happening every day, as well as sidewalk sales. And then usually you'll see the flutist and other things going downtown. So very lively, very energizing to start a season. So that's why we're in front of you today, so we can begin some heavy marketing on behalf of all of us.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah. So I understand. I'm glad you're going to do heavy marketing because I would love for the public to know when the Duck Derby is, where they can buy tickets. I already have mine.
Well, that would be on their own stuff.
Oh, yeah,
So we'll market on behalf of
Everybody
these, but
does
yeah,
their own
certainly,
marketing,
Yeah.
but is there a central? So how does the public know where to look at? There's not a central point.
Not for each one of these. Us as Camden Area Business Group, we're really only responsible for the sidewalk sales.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's any store or stores that are part of your group?
No, any store.
Any store?
Yeah, we open it to the town of Camden.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Traditionally, I believe it's happened, you see most of the downtown merchants,
Right.
but I don't think we're not here to say only downtown can happen. I think
Anyone in
if
Camden.
Rennie's wants to have a little table out on the front of theirs, it's certainly fine with me too. The more commerce, it's a commerce weekend, so.
Cool.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And then in the packet, and I do apologize as I try to keep the code as clean as possible, but on that secondary page in which you received from me, I do realize that I do have the dates wrong. It's still showing last year's dates, but this is a piece of information that will go out to our email list and beyond. I usually hand these out in person as well when I know that certain people aren't members. So it kind of turns into a secondary membership drive for us as well. But it'll put guidelines in front of them so they know how much of the sidewalk they can take up, when it can happen, when it can occur, and all that stuff. So
You make sure to, that wheelchairs and things like that can still get through and all that stuff.
yeah, that's the deal.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
Okay, do we want to?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the request for sidewalk sales by the Camden Area Business Group for the weekend of May
19th.
19th, 2023, and not 2022.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 5, rolling right through the agenda, is an update on the DEP water level order process for the Montgomery Dam impoundment. So there's a good amount of information in our packet about that. Audra, do you want to give an overview?
Yeah, so just as a lead into this one, we were contacted by Kyle Olcott, who is the hydropower coordinator for the DEP, who also runs their water level order program. I think everybody who's at the DEP now is new enough so that they haven't gone through this process before. So, he was kind of laying it out for me, and he said they typically encourage municipalities when something gets to this stage to pass their own ordinance. And I sort of explained to him that, that wasn't likely to be the road that we would go down for this, and that we would like to participate in the process that they would be running. And so he sent through the information on what it looked like, which I've attached in your packet as the booklet on how that process goes. And we've been informed that sort of the first stage of the process will happen on the 20th of May. And that's an opportunity for anybody who hasn't been identified as having standing currently. So it doesn't include the petitioners or the town who's the dam owner, but it could be anybody else who feels like they are a stakeholder in this process, can submit something saying, they would like to be considered as an intervener, and they submit information that gets considered by DEP, and then they make a determination on whether or not they have standing to be considered a stakeholder to a similar level to the petitioner and the town as the owner. So that's sort of the first step.
You want to maybe just backtrack a tiny bit in terms of the basic topic and how we got here? I'm guessing that some people listening might not know.
Yeah, certainly. So
So it's a petition to have the DEP
Regulate the
establish
water.
rules for what the water level would be in the area
just
behind
the-
Montgomery Dam.
Right, just the impoundment of the Montgomery Dam. And the way that works is there needs to be a certain percentage of property owners who petition and are found to have standing. And I believe there were 14 or 13 out of the 14 property owners around that impoundment petitioned to do so. So the next stage in this process is figuring out who else has a stake in this. And I think that given the way that the dams are managed and all the way from the lake down to the harbor, there's going to be a lot of interest amongst a lot of people who live on the river, because they'll be impacted by any decision that's made about the Montgomery Dam impoundment. So that's
Possibly, right.
that's kind of the summary of everything. Is though they're only, for this process, they've only been asked by the petitioners to look specifically at that impoundment in order to keep water levels high for certain times of the year, particularly in the summer. If it hasn't rained, it has an impact on what happens at the lake. So that's going to be, I think, important for everybody to consider, when they're trying to figure out if they want to submit something to the DEP by the 20th of May.
So basically, the DEP will listen to all this, collect information, and then decide whether they are going to establish a water level order. Is that accurate?
So there's a few other things that happen before they do that. This is the very first stage of, it's basically them trying to figure out who's a stakeholder with standing before they have their public hearing, and then before they make any sort of decision.
Tom?
First, I noticed on this cover sheet, Audra, that it states that information must be submitted to the DEP by May 20th, and the town's submission to the DEP will be posted on the town's website as soon as it is available. So we're 18 days out. Do you have an anticipated date for when the town will post on their website their submission to the DEP, our submission to the DEP?
I'd say with any, things like this, it's probably going to be pretty close to May 20th.
Okay. It would be nice to get some opportunity to react to that. I think it would be good to get the, I understand. I know that you have a full agenda in the town office, but the sooner the better, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Definitely. And I would say that, I think that the biggest thing that we can bring to all of this is a request that if they're going to set a water level, it's across the entire, it's from the lake all the way to the mouth of the harbor, because just looking at one segment of the river isn't a practical way to manage water levels.
Yeah, I'll get into that in a minute. One concern I have for the impoundment is this, Dave St. Laurent said he found potentially a 12-inch drain pipe. That should be significantly taken into consideration here. If that is not under the control of the town, which as I understand it, it's not, it's a piece of private property, that makes everything fairly moot, in my opinion, until that is addressed by whoever owns that.
Yes.
And I'd like to emphasize that we can us and the DEP can come up with any level we want, but if somebody else is draining the impoundment, there's nothing we can do about it. As far as the broader, and it was coming up in the public comments earlier today, I think that's something that really needs to be looked at, maybe even more comprehensively than between now and May 20th. So in that regard, what you said, because my yard is completely flooded right now. I've received phone calls from people who live along the river who are very concerned their basements are flooded. I think we need a broader discussion that's going to probably take us beyond May 20th for this. And I, as much as I like having the DEP involved and I want the DEP to be involved, I think this is the discussion that should be made here, or a decision that should be made here, not by the DEP. At least with broad input from
And you
us.
do have the opportunity to do that. So that's a decision that you could all make, is that you want to pass an ordinance. And if you decide to pass an ordinance instead of going down through the DEP's process, they stop because they want the local areas to regulate this kind of thing on their own. So that is certainly a decision that you could all make if you would like to pursue, developing and passing an ordinance.
So this would be something we could develop between the time we submit things to the DEP and before, but even come up with our own ordinance before the DEP gives a recommendation or a ruling?
It's possible. See, this is the thing, because we don't have anyone who's gone through this before, even at DEP, they can't give us any sort of estimate on how long it's going to take. So really, we would be targeting an ordinance for adoption in November.
Okay.
That's really like the soonest that we could get something approved by voters, unless we go outside of our normal meeting cycle. So, we'd be working towards November if we were going to pursue an ordinance locally.
That's what.
Okay, that gives us time to educate ourselves. That's good, it's acceptable.
Which would in some ways be a beefed up version of the current water level policy or the dam operation guidelines, which really don't speak very specifically to, it says, the Montgomery Dam gate will be opened as needed. There are things in there that are too vague, really, to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, they're guidelines. It's an operating policy, so it's pretty, there are some areas where it's fairly specific and other areas where it's, very subjective.
I mean, to me, it seems to make sense to go through the DEP process to some extent, providing them with basic information. This is what's done now. And to me, it would be interesting to hear what they determine based on that for this, particular.
But don't we already have years of data about how the dam and all the water levels have been moved up and down throughout the years? Why do we need DEP to step in and then come in and do their own thing when we already have all the data from years and years and different people that have operated these and maintained water levels?
So I mean, just with the Montgomery Dam and determining what the level should be there, it's a little bit separate from what all of the, the information that we have for all, the lake levels and all of that. So whether it's feasible to have a water level order for the Montgomery Dam.
But we understand what the people want and how we want it much more than the DEP would take into consideration.
Well, depends on whether it is considered a pond or it's considered a river or it's considered a.
It really comes down to what we want as a group of citizens and the board, not just what we deem it to be a pond or a lake or river or anything like that. I mean, the suggestion about making our own ordinance and coming up with what we feel is best, I think should be made on our level. And I feel like that should be step number one, is to figure out how we want to have that maintained. And I feel like having DEP come in, they're going to take it over and it's going to take it out of our hands. And I'm not okay with that.
Is that what would happen if we set our own ordinance even after the DEP made a ruling?
Yeah, the local ordinance will prevail over anything that they do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it could be, in my opinion, it could be temporary, essentially. If the DEP comes in and makes a ruling and we pass an ordinance after the DEP makes a ruling, our ordinance overrules it.
But we would have to go through the entire summer with whatever they choose as a level, which could impact how the water levels on the river and McGonagall look
Well, I'm going
the
to,
entire summer through the fall when they're already so low and have been the last 2 years, so low that we can walk in front of my entire rock wall over on Norton's Pond.
I'm going to bring your attention, just out of curiosity, to page 100 of the packet. For the purpose of setting water levels, a dam must be, and it lists several criteria. Item number 3 is capable of impounding at least 15 acre-feet of water. An acre-foot is 326,000 gallons. So in that regard, it's almost 4.5 million gallons of water. My guess is that the Montgomery Dam doesn't actually qualify as a dam based on that criteria.
Yeah, you're correct, but the commissioner has a discretion to say, even if it doesn't fall within their policy or guidelines, that they still want to go through the water level order process, and the commissioner decided to.
Sure.
Right. I still really feel like taking this out of the small town hands and putting it into the DEP takes it to a much higher level than we ever want to have anybody put their fingers in. I think we know how we want our town to look. We know how we want our town to feel. We know how the levels should be put. We know the data from the rest of the river and the lakes. I feel like we are smart enough and we have people here that could come in and help us make an ordinance. And I think we really, really need to make that happen and keep it out of DEP.
I mean, certain things are going to be with the DEP no matter what, because it's a body of water.
Absolutely.
And determining, I don't think that these things, it has to be an either or thing. This is a bunch of people that own property on the river asked the DEP to step in, to hear everything.
Because the
And-
town's not listening to them. That's why they're doing this. Because the town is not listening when they're saying the levels are not being maintained.
Well, they're just talking about the Montgomery Dam for this one. So
But
if we want to
they
broaden
have
it,
to start there. So we do need to broaden it and we need to make an ordinance that goes, as Audra says, the entire length of the river and make an ordinance and look at it. And I feel like we need to move on that.
Audra, this process that the DEP has started, there's no reason why we can't start our own process to make an ordinance. A, you agree with that, yes. And B, train of thought. I'll come back to it when
I mean, the current process for opening the Montgomery Dam is by request. And so there's the part of this that is all about just managing the flow of the river and the level, generally speaking. And then there's the special request part where MDOT says, we need to work on the bridge, or one of the building owners needs to work on something. And so I think part of this would be figuring out maybe a season that work can be coordinated, or how we deal with conflicting when, one building owner might want it open and one might want it closed.
And honestly, I understand what you're saying, Stephanie, but a lot of this came out of the fact that we just had a board on a gate that was broken.
Mm-hmm.
We fixed it. We had to drain the impoundment to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
People were upset because of the time frame of when it broke and when it needed to be fixed. It was in the middle of the summer.
Right.
And, it's unfortunate that was the timing and that happened, but it was just sort of the reality of what happened last summer. But I think that this was a reaction to that.
Right, but I think it opens a broader conversation that needs to be had, that we can take this opportunity to say, let's look at it and make an ordinance with the data that we already have for the water levels from the Montgomery Dam all the way up through, since Camden now controls the entire water flow. This is the time where we have to stand on our own 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 feet and say, we are going to make an ordinance that makes sense for us, and it's not going to make everybody happy. This is the time we need to do it.
But I think there's value, first of all, in going through the DEP process, just to also listen and learn about best practices in those areas. I mean, we know the data, we know what certain people want. We certainly don't know what the whole town wants.
We could have an open, honest discussion like we keep saying that we want to have, and have a public forum where people can come in, give them a time frame. You have this amount of time to speak on how you feel. Have it a 3-hour meeting designed just for that, like we used to do in the old days when we wanted to hear what people had to say about these things.
But that's exactly the process that the DEP is going to be handling.
We don't need them to do that, is what I'm saying. We can do that ourselves. We can make the decision to say, we can do this. We can make an ordinance that makes sense and have all kinds of different people's points of view come into play.
Tom?
Thank you. I am in favor of public input, absolutely. I also don't have any issues whatsoever with the DEP. To be honest, it's not my area of expertise. So, if somebody at the DEP knows something that they can tell us, it's certainly worthy to be included in the debate and the discussion.
Absolutely.
So as I understand it, this process can't be stopped. The DEP is going through this process regardless of whatever we vote, whatever we ask them to do. This ball is rolling. I think, I agree with you, Stephanie. We should address this. I also welcome any input that the DEP gives us. It's certainly something we can either take into consideration or dismiss if we don't agree with it for whatever reason. But again, given that I don't have the personal or professional expertise, I'm certainly going to listen to some people that do.
There is a lot of history of these types of orders and the DEP stepping in with dams. And I do think that having that perspective, we're not alone in dealing with these issues. We're not alone in dealing with lakes that are flooding and arguments about where the water goes. And I do think it would be helpful to get some perspective from, maybe the DEP will be helpful and maybe they won't, but.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it as an opportunity for them to do research and hold hearings that it would be difficult for us to do otherwise. That's one way of looking at it. So, we could look at it as an opportunity. It might not be the ending place, but it could be a good starting place for this specific topic and discussion.
Ideally, we just wouldn't have to empty that anymore. It could just stay full and pretty, and we could fix everybody's building so that it doesn't have to be empty anymore. Everybody hates it. We all agree that we hate the way it looks when it's empty. But
Right.
that's a topic for another day.
But we also have what Audra said, the whole thing in the summertime and in the fall when it is super dry out there. And what if we can't maintain that water level? We need to take a stronger look, and we need to make it a priority that we do make an ordinance by the November ballot. We have to do that. We have to make it. I mean, we were just discussing that it needs to be looked at. Why are we not going to take
I'm
this as an
absolutely in favor of
opportunity
looking at it.
to make an ordinance, look at it, and have input to make this better?
I would just need more information about the amount of discretion that can be left to an operator with an ordinance versus a policy. I'd like to look back at the notes from when Ken Bailey and others came up with the policy that we have now and decided on a policy rather than an ordinance. Does it make sense to come up with something jointly with Lincolnville? I'm all in favor of talking about this and putting something out to voters or an ordinance if that's what makes sense. I have wanted to talk about it for a long time. And a lot of the problem is coming from the fact that we haven't sat down with everybody and said, okay, in situations where we have to choose between a risk of it being a little too low or a little too high, what should we do? In these in a whole range of situations, what should what should happen, who should be involved. And it's been a long time since we've done that. So
Well, you bring up who should be involved, and we've taken out everybody else that was involved. Camden is the only one that is in charge of this. Lincolnville used to have say, and now they don't. And
Also
that
used
is
to pay.
you are exactly right. That is a discussion for another day, because it's not just about they stopped paying.
I have advocated
a
for
lot.
Lincolnville to be involved in the Citizens Advisory Committee. We are a watershed that needs to make decisions at a watershed level if we want to be, smart about it. Half of our water comes from Lincolnville that goes through
Right.
downtown. So
And Hope, to be honest,
And
Hope has a small amount of frontage on that lake. They do have certainly some stake in it. I've never understood why Hope wasn't involved. But bringing them in should be encouraged. And if there are expenses incurred with the management of the water, they should also share them.
yeah, I mean, there's a whole.
They should
history to
have a
that, so.
seat at the table before they start having to pay for it, though.
Both, I agree.
Absolutely. So that is what I'm advocating for, that this doesn't die here, that we actually put time and effort into making, whatever you want to call it, policy, ordinance, rule, whatever we need. It cannot die here. This is the great launching point for this discussion to happen.
Well, this is the one time when I am moderately in control of what's on the agenda, but as you know, that's not always the case. So I would talk about this all day long if we
Well,
could.
June's coming up and it matters a lot.
Anyway, I don't think there's an action needed. Is there anybody from the public that wanted to make a comment?
I do.
Come on up, state your name.
Yep. Matt Dean, 70 Wiley Road and 355 Washington Street on McGonagall River. First of all, I would like to know who's in charge of the dams right now, the water levels.
So this is the public
The Public
comment.
Works Director is the dam control agent.
Okay? And what qualifications does the Public Works Director have for dams, lake control, rivers, anything?
So this is where one of the things that we can't do right now is get into
Okay.
like an interrogation, but
okay.
you definitely feel free to make your comment and your concerns.
So
and
my
then-
comment is, my family's been on the river since 1956, third generation. My father's here, he's 70 years old. We've never seen the water this high on the river or the lakes. Everybody knew this rainstorm was coming or these rains we're having. Why was there not any thought to drain the water levels, bring the water down before this rainstorm we just had? For one, if you can't answer it, I understand.
So there is a policy, and the amount to which forecasts are used, there's a very big limit to how much the lake can be drawn down
Yep.
in a certain amount of time. And that, I think, is all stuff that needs to be talked about. There's a log from 2014 that shows the different levels, the amount of rain. But you will find that basically everyone in this area, any lake that you go to right now, people are saying the exact same thing. They've never seen it so high. So how we deal with this in the future is something that a policy.
I would say, so the town followed the policy that we'd had set for years.
Okay.
2009 was the last time that policy was updated. And it is not a policy that was written for the type of rain that we're receiving very regularly now.
Right.
So that's the problem that we have. We have an outdated policy, and we really don't have the ability to draw water down quickly. So for a storm like we had yesterday.
Just forecasted out days ahead.
We would have needed 2 weeks to draw the lake down to a level where it could have accommodated that sort of water.
Okay.
But the water was not drawn down at all. It wasn't.
I have a
opened up
pond
at
on my
all.
personal
That's
property
true,
and I
it
drained it
was.
myself,
So one person at a time, please. 'cause
knowing that, well, I thought it was my turn to talk.
They were talking. You
Okay,
interrupted.
sorry, I
them.
thought when a resident came up to the podium, it was their time to talk, but
You-
I
you do-
misunderstood.
You do, but you asked a
So-
question and they were answering
Yeah.
you, so maybe you can listen
So I'm
to
just
them.
saying, I drained my personal pond on my own property, knowing that the rain was coming. I'm wondering why the person in charge of these dams, with so many properties affected, cannot determine that they need to drain some water before these storms or prepare for this.
So we did prepare for it, but you can only prepare so much. And we would have needed, like I said, 2 weeks in advance to have been able to accommodate the amount of water that we received.
One of the things that does happen sometimes is that water is drawn down in anticipation of rain that then doesn't come. And that's been a reason in the past that the lake has ended up low all
Right,
year long.
right.
And so that's the kind of thing that requires a lot of personal discretion on the part of one person, and our policy doesn't say anything about that. For this time of year, the lake is supposed to be between at the spillway level and 6 inches above. Now, that's a very high level for it to be if we think we might get hit with 4 to 6 inches of rain all of a sudden.
Yeah.
How do we want to deal with that risk? Some people say we should keep the lake lower all the time. Some people don't like that idea.
We
So-
all know we have a spring thaw and we have heavy rains in the spring. You live in Maine, you know the snow melts and there's heavy rains. You would anticipate.
And that used to work well when the spring thaw and the heavy rain comes a little bit earlier. But when it comes, right now, people are trying to put their docks in. And when the level gets too low, it becomes
Okay.
very difficult for the docks to move in and out.
Yeah.
So last year, we got a lot of complaints about the lake being too low.
All right.
But
Okay.
you're right, it all needs to be talked
I'd say
about.
as early as a week ago, we were receiving a lot of complaints about how the lake levels were way too low and people who couldn't get their docks in and they were concerned about that. So,
Yep.
you know, I think that weather patterns are changing. We're getting rain at different times. We're getting more rain in, you know, one storm as opposed to over a longer period of time. And we just need to have our policy updated to reflect that reality. And we're still trying to operate as closely as we can off the old policy, and it's just not working anymore.
So it's time for an update.
Yeah, and I was going to say, when we update that policy, it'll be advertised and come to that meeting because we'd appreciate your
Yeah.
input.
Because I mean, it happened last year too. Like this isn't just this year. We know this is a problem. So. Okay. Well, thank you.
We don't have that a lot of other dams have is more sophisticated measuring equipment that's in other places. You can go online all the time. You can see this is what the level's at. This is how much water's coming out. Here, it's a lot of speculation and you have to call and ask. And if you want to see what the level is at the dam, you can kind of like peer around from Beaucaire Avenue. But it would be better, in my opinion, if you could have it like more updated and modern so that everybody could know this is what the level's at. This is what, this is.
So I
how
guess
much
my
water.
question, and whether you can answer it or not, I'll let you determine that. Is the person in charge of the water levels in the dams qualified to be the person in charge of the water levels in the dams?
But that's irrelevant.
If you can't answer, that's fine.
I mean, he follows the policy.
Follows the
And
policy,
he's,
yeah.
he's very conscientious.
Okay, and I don't even know who it is. I don't care, but
It
so
comes
the
down,
policy is the problem.
I agree, yes.
That's what I'm at. Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Force myself to stop talking about this. And moving on, are we done with this topic or did anybody else want to speak?
I would say I think it's Stephanie's point about an ordinance is really important, but I do need you to all vote on it and tell me that's what you want us to do if we're going to start.
I make a
working on it.
motion that we start working towards an ordinance to control the water levels from the Montgomery Dam clear up to the McGonagall that Camden has the privy to control by the November ballot.
Could we get a little bit more information first, or could we vote to have somebody come and, I mean, if an ordinance is what's appropriate, that's fine. If it's a policy that needs to be updated, that's also fine with me. If there's a better mechanism for doing it jointly with Lincolnville, I need a little bit
Again,
more information.
It
before
all depends on what you all want. There's benefits and drawbacks to a policy versus an ordinance versus letting DEP set the order.
How would we best become informed of
So
those?
that's, yeah.
Well, I can tell you a few of them right now. So policy, that can happen quickly. You can all pass it. It doesn't need to go to voters. And it can be put into effect pretty quickly. An ordinance, that does need to go to voters. It has a little more rigor and teeth to it. you know, it's going to take a longer amount of time to develop it and to do all the outreach that we
When
need to
does it
do.
have to be ready to be put on the November ballot?
It would need to be developed probably around the end of September is when all of
We
the,
have over 4 months to be able to gather the information to create an ordinance. Or if we don't have time to make the ordinance, we can make a motion to table it till next June.
you could do that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Just a question on the process here. I mean, this wasn't advertised as an action item. Can we vote to, make a policy or to ask you to draft an ordinance, draft a policy, draft an ordinance? Or do we have to put it as an action item on the next meeting if we want to proceed like that?
We can make a motion on anything that we want at any
Vote
time
to change
during
the
the meeting.
agenda, but
All you need are 3 votes.
Yep.
be appropriate to vote to ask that it be placed on a future agenda so that we could discuss the policy and a potential ordinance?
What I'd like to do is before I vote on that, I'd like to see the current policy.
Right.
So I'd like to do a little research. I'd like to have it as part of the next, what I would be willing to say is Bob's going to be back. Talk to Bob about having this as an agenda item with the current policy and a discussion and action item on updating that policy.
Process.
Correct. Yeah.
we could vote to have something on the next agenda. I think that's
Sure.
I would support that as well, because I feel that voting on deciding to have an ordinance or a policy right now, I don't have any grounds to.
Is every single one of us going to email Bob to make sure that it gets on the agenda before he's done? Can we make that? I'll pull back my motion if every single one of us can make an email to Bob saying we want it on the next agenda.
I'm willing to write that email.
I don't think it's very funny at all. I am being very serious.
I think you're pushing for an item that.
To be on the agenda
Can you
to
let
talk
me
about this.
Stephanie, you've cut me 3 times now, so let me finish what I'm thinking. Number one, I think the proposal to have a discussion about what type of instrument we want to use to regulate the water level, whether it's DEP process, whether it's an ordinance, whether it's a policy, is worth a discussion at the board level.
Absolutely.
And I don't have any information right now that allows me to make any kind of decision.
I understand.
So if you want to pull back your motion, do so. So far, it hasn't been seconded. But I am willing to support Tom's proposal, which I just repeated basically. But let's put it on the agenda and have a conversation at the next board meeting that what type of instrument is the most appropriate to manage the water level, especially given that we're going to be entering into the summer where we know we're going to have issues around drought and lake level and all kinds of levels. So that's my proposal. Tom, if you want to make the motion, you're the one.
Well, actually, my motion's on the table right now.
Your
That's
motion is
why
not seconded.
it
Okay,
hasn't.
this is not my strong area, but let's take turns. So Stephanie made a motion. Is there a second to that motion? No. So the motion dies, I think.
Correct.
No, it fails.
Correct.
Is there another motion?
I'm going to make a motion that we advise the board chair as a group to put on the next board agenda a discussion, an action item for a policy or ordinance update on water levels on the Meguntacook watershed.
I second.
All those in favor?
Can I have a discussion
Oh,
on
yes,
that
sorry.
first?
Yes, I need to-
So I just want to be very clear that your motion states that it will be on the next agenda.
It did, yes.
Just wanted to make sure that that was perfectly clear.
Yeah, it's public record.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor? 4-0.
Perfect.
All right. So the DEP process will continue in the background. Okay, moving on to action items. Number 1A, the approval of a new Vittler and lodging license for two establishments, the High Tide Inn at 505 Belfast Road for a new Vittler and lodging license, and Paper Plane at 1 Wayfarer Drive for a new Vittler license. Is this also a public hearing?
No.
No, oh, no, it's just,
a
because it's not
victular-
liquor.
Yeah, it's a
It's not
Vittler
liquor. We
license.
just,
Huh.
They already had their public hearing for their liquor license.
liquor
above.
license.
Any questions, discussion, board? Any public comments on this item? Anybody online? A motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the vicular license for the Paper Plane at One Farrer Drive. Is that the one that we're talking about?
That's one of them. We could handle them separately.
Oh, could we do it all at once?
Sure. Also, there's the High Tide Inn at 505 Belfast Road for a Vittler and lodging license.
That's my motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? 4-0. Okay, next. Oh, proclamation designating, we already did that as part of
It
this
was in the
consent.
consent agenda.
Oh, right, and I'm back to my paper copy, which was already deemed. Sorry about that.
The paving bid?
Okay, bid award, street paving.
Oh,
I
yeah.
believe that we have a memo in our packet about the street paving.
Yes, so the low bidder was mainly paving. They came in at, I'll just do the per tonnage. Their per tonnage rate was 109.42. And then the next lowest price was Performance Paving at 120,000 a ton.
Audra, have we worked with Mainly Paving in the past?
So this is a new company, but we've worked with the owner when they were at Performance Pay, or what's the company they worked for? Allstate.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of them.
Yeah, he's very experienced in this field.
Is that the one that's being recommended as it's highlighted?
Yes, the low bid.
I make a motion that we approve the bid from Mainly Paving Services LLC for
I would say $190 asphalt per ton, maybe.
the total bid price, asphalt, total bid price of $609,992, asphalt per ton of $109.42.
I second.
Can I
And
have a
any
little?
discussion?
Yeah. Have we worked with the other two companies before?
Yes.
Do we have any issues with their performance, like Performance Paving? Since we worked with them before, did we have any problems with them?
So they're doing, right now, they were the last contract, I think. They did the public landing, right?
Well,
Maybe
I
doing
would
the-
say if they had come in as the low bidder, we would have been fine going with
We would
them.
have gone with them.
They're a good company. I've hired Performance. They're great, but it is a significant price difference.
And he's worked with him before, so he's a former employee, right? That's what you were saying?
Of a different paving company that we worked with before and also had a really good experience with.
Was he the head of that paving?
Yeah.
Oh,
So it's been motion and seconded.
Yeah, yes.
Did you have more questions?
I certainly don't have the expertise to go against what the recommendation is for
To talk
paving.
about it a little
I
bit.
don't like paving that much, but I understand it's necessary. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. Back to the agenda. Are we at the proposal from C? Is that the?
Yes.
To get back to my digital agenda here. Okay, so item C, consideration of aquarium and proposed design concept by C, which is the Stewardship Education Alliance for the public landing. Wayne, I think we'll just turn it right over to you.
Did you guys get a photo of that?
Yes, it's in the packet.
What I don't want to get was this plan.
It's in the packet, but yes, thank you.
A paper copy would be
Thank you.
perfect.
I'm a paper fan.
I know, I'm not.
Actually,
but
I
in
have,
this-
we have it in the
I-
packet
yeah,
as well, yeah.
Thank you.
So this is something, I'm Wayne Ruswick, and I am the Vice President of the Stewardship Education Alliance. We're a local nonprofit. Our mission is to increase the community awareness of ways to be better stewards of our local watersheds. And you guys may or may not be familiar with some of our other activities. We've got grants to teachers in the 5-town school district, both public and private schools. We have the SEA Fair, which this year will be featuring 20 local nonprofit environmental groups. We do the Poetry on Windows, which will be up in time for the Cabbage event. And we also have a mobile touch tank that we take out to local schools and libraries and local events so kids can get their fingers on the local critters that we have in the harbor. We recently, probably 2 years ago now, got a grant to build an aquarium that would be down at the harbor. And we've had some discussions with some of the people on the board here or are present tonight about where that might work and what it might involve. And you can see the layout there. Basically, it would be, as you're looking at the harbor, just to the right of Mr. Pixley's mansion. Currently, there's a bike rack there that takes up several parking spaces. We'd like to stretch that out a bit, turn that bike rack around to the right end of that, bring in some temporary planters that would have trees that would get planted around town every fall after they have spent their summer luxuriating near the harbor. I also would build some benches that would have native plants in them. All this would have signage on it that would describe what the native plants are, what they're good for, what they're helpful for the local environment. The aquarium would house native creatures that we have in the area and possibly a few that aren't quite in our area that are fun for kids to look at, like horseshoe crab and that sort of thing.
133.
Additionally, we've talked about possibly putting signage along the harbor so that if you show up with your grandkids, you can take them along, do a little tour along the harbor, learn more about the harbor and how to protect it and what creatures are in there, which ones should be and which ones shouldn't be, etc. This is a very temporary setup. It's something that we'll dismantle every fall, tuck in the side of the parking lot so it can be plowed. It won't be sitting there year round, causing trouble down there. And depending on what happens in the longer term down there, if it has to be moved to a slightly different location or raised or lowered, it's all stuff that can be moved around with a forklift. So it's not something that we're going to set concrete for and make it a permanent fixture down there. Do you guys have questions for me?
Wayne, how much space would this take up in terms of parking spaces?
As it's drawn, it's a total of 4, so 2 in addition to what's already taken up by the bike rack that's there.
So right now, we're losing 2 parking spaces to the bike rack, and now we'd lose 4 spaces to this entire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And as far as there's circulating water into your aquarium.
Yeah, this will have an intake probably on the second float out in the harbor, and water will be pumped up continuously and drained back into the harbor.
So the pump is internal to the aquarium, and just a couple of inflow, outflow.
There'll be basically 2.5-inch lines running to and from the harbor for return water and the feed for it.
Okay, and that the
pump
power
itself
supply.
is actually down in the base of the harbor.
Well, the pump is in the harbor. Okay,
It's
no-
submerged, it stays cool. It's a more efficient way to run the pump.
Sure. And the power supply for that pump?
That will run from up on the dock and then down to the pump.
But I mean,
That'll
like
be
that,
waterproof.
that's something that's going to be paid for by the town.
That is the one cost the town will bear. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the cost of running that pump.
And we've already determined that there's an adequate source there, or we're going to need to install that.
Ron Hartford seems to think there's plenty of power to run. It doesn't draw a significant amount of power.
They could plug into an existing receptacle, or we're going to need to hire Ron to install a new receptacle or a new power supply.
He seems to think we can run it off an existing outlet that's there. If not, it's something that we would fund him to do that.
The grant, the SEA, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've spoken to Ron about making this come together, so he's aware of what we need to do to make it happen.
Okay.
Sophie?
So how long is the grant for?
Excuse me?
How long is the grant for?
Well, the grant we received, it was a one-time grant that, I mean, the money's just been mostly sitting in our account. I've got probably 80% of the tank completed at this point. I've been waiting for final approval from you guys because I need to buy some very expensive plexiglass that'll go into it, and I don't want to buy that pump yet until I know that this is going to happen. The other thing, I've spoken with Steve Pixley, will also be tying into the internet there so we can monitor temperature and status of our pump and things through that system.
So another question is probably a question to Audra. So I'm confused as to the process. So you came up and you proposed to the town to install an aquarium on the public landing. This was not a request for proposal. Nobody else got the opportunity to share a project or a similar thing. So if we agreed to this, it would be just for you. When a few months ago, we refused to put a lobster shack because we don't have a policy for public landing occupation. Right? So that's what we're asked to do.
Yeah. I mean, my contention would be that this is for the public good versus for a private enterprise, but
Are you a 501c3?
we are a 501c3, we're nonprofit.
I have a question. One of the things that I get questions about all the time down there is like, is there a water fountain? Where can I fill up my water bottle? Is this the same area where we actually do have a very hidden
There is a very
drinking
small water
fountain there that I missed for my entire upbringing here and found it about 4 years ago. Would you be able to?
I think we could reconfigure it and bring it over and make it part of this little micro park.
Would there be a way for people to walk, like accessing the boardwalk right now is sometimes,
It's really awkward.
Difficult
You have to wedge
when-
it next to Steve's. What I had talked to Dave St. Laurent about is we probably would pull out a piece of the granite that's the curbing there currently and remove a piece of the rope fence. So there will be a pass through next to Steve's.
You can see on the plan here, right?
So it opens it up. It makes it more accessible than it is currently. There could
Right.
possibly be one on the right end of it too, but I think because there's a tree there, it would be really awkward to make it work on that end. But that end on the right where the tree is where that fountain is currently.
I mean, to me, I like the idea of it as a kind of like a test thing to see if the public likes it, if it's something that could be educational and interesting, and then people say, wow, this is so much better than having 2 parking spots. What would happen though if, what kind of a commitment are you looking for? Is it?
I mean, if we could get a couple year try on this, a couple years so that people can see it 1 year and we can figure out some of the things we didn't learn this year so we can make it right next year. It is going to be our first time putting a big tank together. I built our touch tank, and it's a mobile tank that we take around to schools and different events, but it's a much smaller, simpler thing to pull off. The other thing that I've got for help on this project is working with Ed Seidel, who used to be a resident of Camden, and he is now a national level aquarium designer. He does work for Monterey Bay and Boston Aquarium and Georgia State
aquarium. He's done them all over the US. So he's been consulting on what's the right pump and what's how many water changes per hour and things that are out of my expertise. I can build it, but I don't know all the details of running it.
Did you look at any other places down at the harbor to have this?
Initially, we were going to wedge it in on the left side where all the mechanicals and electricals are down there next to Steve's shed. And it was really tight for space. And in communication with a group from the board and from Dave St. Laurent and Steve Pixley, there was a discussion about maybe it would be better to put it in some place where it's got more space. And that's when the spot to the right of the harbor master's office came up.
So you didn't look at the green area under the tree way over if you're looking at Steve's, if you're looking at this, it would be over here by where the left side of the dam comes down and around, that green area over there.
Up where the bell is.
Yes, actually, yes, sorry, I forgot about that.
I mean, that might be a possibility. I would have to look into the logistics of pumping the water that far and returning it and keeping it cold enough. But that might be a possibility.
So so you said there's going to have to be 2.5 inch
Yeah, they're basically
tubings.
like ginormous garden hose. They're
Right.
flexible rubber.
So those would have to go over the boardwalk.
No, before the recent pour that went on down there, I got drainage pipe underneath it. So I've got a pathway to get through that seawall and out with those hoses.
Okay.
Wait, did we agree to this? Did the town agree to this?
Conduit thing that's like a
this is like-
placeholder kind of thing that can be used for.
It's just a tube that,
Yeah.
it's drain pipe. It was just
No,
put in with the anticipation that if this happens, we've got a place to do it. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to get hosing out through there.
I'm just shocked that was, I'm going to move on and just go on to my next question on that.
Did they do that in a number of places as placeholders for? I don't know that it was
that Ron
special
was
for
down
you.
there putting in conduit to get the lines out that are feeding the power down onto the
Yeah,
wharf,
they
the
switched the
docks.
location of where the electrical conduit went. It's on the other side of the wharf
And then
now,
there's phone lines. Don't the schooners have
There's
phone
a-
lines? Isn't there there's all
stuff.
kinds of stuff underneath there? I don't think it's.
There's water lines that go down there. There's the, electrical, the
And
conduit.
there
for
is
the-
also, if the town needs to run anything in the future, there is 3.5 inches underneath that boardwalk that could have things.
Yeah.
Put through.
No, I'm not. I was just,
Yeah, it
like I
just
said, I'm
sounded-
just
yeah.
going to move on from that and go into just my concerns of the location of this. So this is right in a very high traffic area. I do have concerns about taking away 2 extra parking spots, a total of 4, when we've already just redid the whole landing with parking in mind.
Mhm.
That does kind of make me wonder, have thoughts about that. I haven't put them into concise thinking. These are just my gut reactions. With the activity that will happen around this aquarium, I just feel like there's a potential of having a lot more congestion on the harbor walk and in that area. Do you have any way that you're going to control that? Is somebody going to be there all the time, I guess, would be?
It would be ideal if we had a docent there the whole time. It would be nice to have someone that's explaining the wildlife and whether we can keep a volunteer effort to do that or not. I'm not sure.
Right.
It's a lot of manpower to
So
keep
it will be an open touch tank that's
It's
just
not
available?
a touch tank.
Okay,
It's not a touch tank.
I
It's just-
misunderstood that then.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
we have a mobile touch tank. And one of the things that this aquarium would allow us to have is essentially a hotel room for those creatures that we take out in our touch tank.
So why do we need such a large area for that?
We don't need it. It's just, it was suggested to me. I mean, I didn't come up with this idea initially. It came from, Dave St. Laurent and Steve Pixley and, it kind of.
The area, you mean? The
moving it to
area.
that area and taking some more space so
Okay.
that it had some room around it and wasn't quite so wedged in. I mean,
One of the
where we had originally proposed it, I think would have been a traffic flow issue because if people stopped there, they couldn't have gotten by on the left side of the harbor master's hut.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of just quick background, the Pathways Committee at the same time had gone around and identified a lack of bike racks. The only bike rack on the public landing was in that triangle in the middle of all the cars. And so they had asked, there were like a series of requests being made. Somebody said, can you have a water fountain down there? Then there was this idea of pushing this tank there. They already have a freestanding bulletin board that has a bunch of information about the harbor that's there.
Yeah, to the left
And-
side as you walk up to the harbor master's office. there's a little bulletin board.
And so I think that's where the idea came from, like maybe a few of these requests
Yeah, and
could
requests
be
for picnic tables.
combined. Oh yeah, more picnic tables. And so it was like, well, maybe the aquarium, since Wayne can build things, he could make it so the bike rack doesn't look so out of place and the aquarium could go there and they could move their sign over.
I mean, and we would not have room in there for picnic tables, but the planters would also have bench edges on them. So there'd be sitting space for people to sit down, have their hot dog or their ice cream cone, and their kids can be looking at the aquarium. And one of the other things that we'd like to do is tie this into the high school and have high school interns that would be the docents or maintainers of it during the summer season. So it would be something they could get credit for as well as having a summer job to do that.
Tom?
Would your SEA organization be responsible for watering all the plantings?
Yes,
Okay, you'd take care of that yourself.
I'm assuming when someone was there, the tank's going to need cleaning and maintaining on a regular basis. So when someone was there, they would just water the trees and plants.
Okay. I mean, the design concept looks very nice. I don't think the best use of our harbor front is parking personally. I like other features. We do have a lot of parking down there. I see that as very valuable real estate. I think parking doesn't necessarily have to happen on such valuable real estate. In general, I like this concept design. What is your minimum? This is 4 parking spaces that I'm looking at. As I understand it, 2 parking spaces are already lost to the bike rack. Could you fit it into 2? It would, in my opinion, it would look a little cramped, but could it be done?
I think with the bikes being active in and out of the rack, I think it would be very challenging.
About 3.
3 would probably be doable.
Your minimum?
And I think keeping the bike rack on the right end so that bikes can get in and out that way and keep the other side open
Okay.
for access to the tank.
One of the things that it says in our downtown master plan is that there are a series of things that are contemplated with the redesign down there, but everybody and all the different groups that worked on that had agreed that a little bit of parking, at least it was ranging from either 10% to 90% of the parking should be converted to something sort of like what you're talking about, Tom, like more pedestrian and user-friendly, not just parking for precisely that reason because of the value of the real estate. To me, this kind of seems like an opportunity to try out a little bit, try something out and see if people like it. I would be uncomfortable committing to more than a year, just because, if it's a disaster, it's kind of a big opportunity, and you want it to be at least.
I would love to have 2, just because, as I say, if we don't get it up and running well, it's not going to show well in the first year. I had hoped to get on the agenda earlier than this so that I could maybe get started earlier than this, but you guys are busy. So
You have been waiting a while to be on the agenda.
I have been, but patience is a virtue, I hear. If I'm asking big favors here, but if I could anticipate 2 years, that would be great. If you give me a year, I get a year, but.
Right. Of
I
course, none
would-
of us can commit beyond a year technically and legally, I think, but
I would really like to see a presentation of not just this location, because we've talked about doing something over in the left-hand corner quite often, and I feel like this would be a great opportunity to showcase that corner. And if we're going to have little kids running around, if we're going to have high school kids over there, I just feel like that would be a great area, and it's shaded. I would like to see something like that be presented. I mean, I think this is a great idea. I'm just not sold on the fact that it should be front and center, right there with that kind of, and going with Sophie's point, it is a completely different situation, but a lot of the same points can be brought up
Yeah.
about the lobster shack that we did turn down. A lot of the same points can be brought up for this area as well. I mean, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying I would like to see that area be, looked at.
We've talked briefly about that area, and I think maybe longer term, that might be a great spot. Does the town even have possession of all that land yet? Isn't there
yeah,
some
I think
question
there's a
about
little bit of,
leases
there
that-
is that lease, but also, I don't know if this would be an issue, but I've heard the lobstermen have issues with the freshwater content of the percentage of saltwater to freshwater over there.
I would
And if
have
you have
to,
a salt.
still have to pull water
pull
from the
from-
middle of the harbor.
Okay.
That's why I said I would have to check on which pump would be appropriate. I'm sure I can get the water up there, but if we could do it down near the harbor initially, as I say, it's all transportable, so it's not like we're locked into this. And then maybe if we could work toward figuring out where it might work up there. I mean, I'd love to see it in a little park up there. I probably would have to do some more fundraising just for the amount of piping and the increased size of the pump to get up there. But I think it'd be a great spot. It is shaded. It's
Yeah,
and
I just
think it's
feel
something
like,
that people don't necessarily go up to there.
Right.
They see the waterfall, but is a nice little piece of green space there.
right. I just feel like, I'm pulling a Tom. It just went right out of my head. Thanks, Tom. Did it fly over to you?
What is pulling a
What I
Tom?
was gonna say.
Oh, forgetting what you're going to
The train
say?
has left
I
the
don't think
station.
that's
Like, I have another question, and it's not to you, it's to my colleagues on the board, because one of the reasons why we turned down the lobster shack was precedent, and was saying, if we allow the lobster shack, then what happens if we have another 10 organization asking for the same thing? So it is not a question to you, it's really a question to the board. If we're allowing this even for a year, why aren't we not opening a different process to allow other 501c3 to come and showcase whatever they want to showcase? I feel that the lack of consistency in the using the public landing is really working against us, and it has nothing to do with your project. I think it's a great idea. I like this idea very much. I'm just, consistency, precedent especially precedent is the point that my colleagues on the board used to vote down the lobster shack.
Well, I voted in favor of Mark's proposal.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was something that would have broadened our harbor. I thought it was good for locals, and I thought it was good for visitors as well. I thought it was educational. I thought it was economic. I liked it. I would suggest that we have a lot of precedents down there. Like, isn't Harbor Dogs a repeating precedent? And some of the other agreements that we have in and around the public landing, or even on town space in general. It is, our responsibility. We've been elected leaders. We ran for this seat to decide what's best for that space. It's well within our purview. And I frankly support this. I think this would look great downtown. I can see a lot of kids being interested in this. I just, based on the looks, based on the educational, aspect of it. And based on the fact that, after a year, if we're going to ask the SEA organization to make some adjustments or tell them that it didn't meet, the vision that we had for this, then we can move on. But I do think this would be a nice addition to the public landing. I don't like the fact that the public landing looks like just a big parking lot by the ocean. I'd like to see more there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's different being a 501c3, and it feels like part of this is being responsive to what the public has been asking for, or at least some portions of the public have been asking for down there. So it's a little different than a business proposal, but I absolutely see the point. I will say that part of the reason I was frustrated to get the Lobster Shack proposal was because I knew that this one hadn't even been able to get on the agenda for over a year of politely asking an organization that has established a good track record with the town. They've put on successful fairs that, come off well in the library, and people attend them, and we've gotten really good feedback. And so I agree that there does need to be more of a process, but this isn't just a business proposal. It's
But why are we favoring 501c3s and not businesses? I mean, businesses are the heart of Camden. If we don't have businesses, we don't have, it makes no sense to me. It doesn't matter if you're a business or a 501c3. We cannot have those policies where we say we have Harbor Dogs, which is a business, and we have Lobster Shack, and we're not going to take them. And we're going to take a 501c3 because it's fish and it's kids, but we're not, it makes no sense. There is no consistency.
Sure.
No, there's no consistency. So the same way Stephanie vocally advocated to have an ordinance to look at the water level, I think we need to really revisit this public landing usage, because we cannot make decisions that are contradicting each other every 2 months. It makes no sense.
Stephanie?
So I'm not going to speak to the Lobster Shack. I feel like that's been hammered. As far as usage down on the public landing, if anybody wants to use the public landing right now, put in an application, bring something that shows your plan, and try to get it on the agenda, and we'll eventually talk about it when it gets on the agenda. I mean, that's basically where we're at right now. That is the plan that we have in place. If you want to have something on the harbor, you bring it forth. I like your proposal. Definitely different merits to me than the Lobster Shack. I've been sitting here trying to think of other businesses or other nonprofits that could bring something similar. Do you have anybody off the top of your head that could match anything that's similar to this?
I don't know about similar to this. I mean, one of the things that we try to do, and when we have our SEA fair, we bring together a bunch of local nonprofits, and the point of that is to get them all to communicate, share resources, not fight for the same grant funding, and sort of be more of a team effort. One of the things that I would love to do with this, I've spoken with Chris Van Duzen about getting him to do some signage for us, some characters that would be eye-catching and fun. And I've briefly talked to the Coastal Mountain Land Trust about integrating some of this same signage and font to get it onto some of their properties to discuss upland bogs and mature highland forest. And so if you had your grandkids out, you could eventually take them around on a tour of the local area. Maybe there's a passport. So your kid has gone to 3 things. They get a hat, they get a badge, they get a t-shirt. And none of that is fully figured out yet.
Right. But you
As
don't,
far as something at the harbor, there's no one doing exactly what we do.
right. But is there anybody out there that's close enough that, say in 2 months, they put something together and they come in and they say, hey, we want to put our aquarium right next to yours. And we want to take up 2 more spaces, because that was one of the items why we,
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand what
somebody
you're
else want
saying.
to talk? Because I'm
I'm
not
sorry, I
quite
was
done.
distracted by the guinea pig comment. You're right.
So, because that was one of the reasons that the fish shack was,
Right, that suddenly there's.
because
now you
we
have to
already
leave them.
knew we had
Mhm.
at least 3 that were going to come in. And our visions, I will speak for myself, actually. My vision was we're going to have 3 different lobster shacks. And is that the view that I want to see from my harbor? And my answer to that was no.
Mhm.
This is, I'm sitting here really, really trying to think of, is there any other person that's going to come in here that's going to want to put different aquariums or such like in the harbor? What would that visually look like? It's a completely different situation to me to look at this. My big thing is the congestion that could potentially, because we keep saying this seems like it's going to be a really great draw for kids. And like we just said, our landing is a parking lot.
Yeah,
And it's going to be right in the middle, right at the head of the parking lot, with all of the boat traffic people also coming in and out. It seems that's my first, if I had grandkids,
Get me.
that would be my first thought was, ooh, how we need to keep the kids together because this is a really dangerous area, kind of.
Already, right?
I would
Yeah.
almost anticipate that rather than causing congestion, it's going to actually make the boardwalk a little more freely open, because people that are wedged in there now trying to eat their hot dog or their ice cream would have a place to go sit down while their kids are looking at the aquarium. I think it's going to actually open up that space, which is now parking, to humans instead of 2 cars or whatever we're talking about removing.
Okay, also, this is a lively discussion. Do we have any comments from the public before we? Oh,
Go ahead, I'll go next.
No worries. I like this. Thank you. Hi, I'm Chris Nolan, Town of Camden. What I like is the view of the harbor. When I'm driving down what used to be Unique 1, this is the harbor, but these are trees. I guess there's schooners behind here somewhere. That kind of, to me, you're changing a big view of what people see as the harbor, which the other thing, in thinking about the design, if this is like a good thing to do, why have this thing further to the aquarium? And thanks for using Ed Seidel. He was a wrestling partner of mine. Good guy. Long time ago. I would move, why not move that over to the building so it's not blocking part of the view?
That's a possibility. There's some stuff stored there currently by one of the.
Yeah, and the other thing that isn't shown here are the other parking spots that are like over here. They're not drawn in. They'd be over here. And I know as it currently is, these are the ones you take a right, you take a left. It's really tight in there. And with these pieces being where they are, is that going to either further jam up or further restrict? Or what impact will this have on the people who are tending the day scooters? Because I know they used to, come in there with their cars and, unload their stuff, put it on the boardwalk where they've got their business. You've got the harbor dog people with, again, people milling about, but it's always really tight in through here and using it for cars.
Would it extend out any further, Wayne, than the parking currently?
It would be within the current parking spots.
And now those trees, are they probably a little exaggerated in terms of what?
Ed Seidel's team, I don't know how good a wrestler he was, but. He was pretty good. Yeah. They're.
Sorry, hey, Wayne.
Wayne, yeah.
Wayne, so that people can hear, all of your comments are going to be lost. Tom, do you want to speak first? Okay, after.
I was going to suggest that, from my perspective, the tree, like Allison said, I suspect the trees will be a little smaller.
They will be smaller.
I will also
something they clicked in there real quick.
I will also suggest that this view is nicer than the view of the backs of automobiles, which is the view you have now.
Mhm.
Right. Yep. And now, come on up. Yes.
I think he's a little older than me. Matt Dean, question. So the Lobster Shack that you were talking about that you denied, was that a nonprofit?
No.
No.
Okay, so I'm just curious how we're comparing that to this. How are they in the same category? How are they the same classification? You're talking a business making money and a nonprofit. I don't know how we're comparing those at all. That layman resident, I don't know how that's even the same category, to be honest with
I
you.
mean, I think what it is we've been getting, it's unsolicited proposals that we then are like, oh, this seems like a good idea, and there hasn't always been a policy. I think some of us share your perspective,
Right?
but that
I mean, you're
overall,
talking businesses making money versus a nonprofit, they don't even compare.
It's not a matter of comparing. It's not a matter of
It is a matter of comparing, actually.
No, it's not. It's not a matter of comparing a nonprofit against a business. It's a
Well,
matter.
wait, time out.
Let me finish,
Okay.
please. Okay. It's a matter of having a
Time out.
policy on how we're. Do you want to come up here and share also
Yeah.
your thoughts?
okay,
One comment, if I can. A nonprofit is a business.
so you
Wait,
gotta,
will you-
so
I'm
in
sorry,
order
you have
for
to come up
your,
and introduce yourself.
Camden, Maine. A nonprofit is a business that does not pay taxes in the town of Camden.
I am not making a difference between a nonprofit and a business. A
nonprofit is a business.
I am not making a difference between a nonprofit and a business.
Okay.
My point is we are being opportunistically adjudicating usage of the public landing.
Yep.
One, we said no to a lobster shack because we were afraid of precedent, and we're about to say yes to a nonprofit, and we're not afraid of precedent because it's educational. To me, the point I'm trying to make is that we're lacking consistency on how we want the public landing to be used outside of parking. And I'm not comfortable having ad hoc decisions without a policy. Whether it's for nonprofit or businesses, I personally don't care. I also understand that a nonprofit is a business that doesn't pay taxes, but it's not the point. It doesn't matter what the incorporation and IRS tax status is of those
Well, I can
entities.
Sorry.
So that's my point. What's going to happen in next month when we get another proposal for guinea pigs, whatever is going to happen? We have no policy for this usage of the landing. That's my point.
so
My
I
last
am
thought.
gonna, this is gonna be the last thing because I know otherwise everybody's gonna say that. One time Allison chaired the meeting, they talked about aquariums for 5 hours. So let's try to cut ourselves off after this and.
All I'm saying is sitting there listening, they were being compared as the same. They were being the same classification. The 301C was being thrown around for both examples. They're not the same. Right? When you're sitting there listening, it's not the same. But they were being compared to as the same. That's my point. I'm going to leave. That's it.
I am not comparing that.
I don't agree.
No, it's-
But
Stephanie, do you want to make the final comment, the closing remark here? Great.
Good luck. Good luck with you. Let's go.
My final comment, can you just come up to the microphone again, Wayne? If we suggested not using trees, would that be acceptable to you?
We could do that. I mean, I guess part of it was to make it feel a little more park-like.
Mhm.
We could certainly do stuff in lower planters, but I guess part of it was to make it feel
Yeah,
unlike a parking lot, which is, I mean, I love our harbor. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. But the approach to our harbor is not beautiful.
Yeah.
You go across a big wasteland of tar. And one of the things that we talked about was making it a beautiful little spot
Yeah.
in the middle of that.
Mhm.
Is this gonna be like the
those are obviously
umbrellas,
bigger
or-
trees than they will be. So, they're not going to be as dominant as that. You will be able to see through them. They're not, Dave's going to take them out in the fall and he's going to plant them around town. So, we're talking
Mm.
I don't know, 10-foot trees or something.
I mean, I am ready to make a motion if you want.
Please.
I was,
Oh, do you want to say something?
yeah, well, just one
Oh.
final thing. And I feel like I'd be remiss after sort of bringing something up similar
Mhm.
with, Stephanie, when we were talking about water levels and how we approach that, to also, speak to Sophie's point about a policy for usage of the public landing. We have received requests that we've had to deal with on an ad hoc, one-off basis. And this is something that we could certainly work on. Again, I just need to be directed by all of you to do that, and we can do that. And that would kind of give us guidelines or guideposts for when we get requests like this, or a lobster shack, or people who want to sell t-shirts, whatever the case may be, as to how we do it, where they could go. We could open up opportunities so there is more activity there, and guidelines for the types of uses that that could be approved. So
Yep.
just saying, it's something that we can.
No, I agree. And again, I'm not against this project. I think it's a great idea. I'm just
I understand what
disturbed
you're
by
saying
the- by
about
the lack of
precedent, and it is
con-
dangerous to set precedents, so.
Tom?
On that broader point, I'm actually fine with either. I'm fine with a policy that, a process that a requester goes through. I'm also fine with, bring it on. That's why we're here. We were elected to make decisions. So, we debate the merits of this project. And if there's another project next week, we can debate the merits of that one. That's why we're here.
I would like to see something that just shows all the existing agreements that we have, and, maybe a survey of the, informal survey of the property, just to know
For
these are the
down on the
boundaries and
landing?
these are the existing agreements that we have within that boundary. Like, we've got some funny stuff with dumpsters, trading with, it would,
Just on the landing or like,
yeah, just on the public landing.
okay.
At some point, just to know, this is our property, these are the agreements that we have with other entities. But I agree with everything that's been said. Are we ready?
I'll make a motion if you would like. I make a motion that we approve the SEA plan that we have here, but I will make the caveat that the trees be removed from it for this 1 year, and then we can revisit it after.
Second?
Any discussion? I have a little bit of discussion. I feel like the trees would serve a similar, the idea of having, I would hope that they would build the part where there's the place for people to sit with some planters first, rather than the aquarium first, so that if one thing gets left out, it's not the thing that's gonna immediately benefit the public. And it seems like oftentimes people are down there seeking out a place that's slightly in the shade, which is why all the schooner people have the umbrellas. Are you opposed to any shade, or is it
I'm not
the concern
opposed.
that it's like gonna be blocking, or could it be like not higher than the umbrellas, or are you flexible on that at all?
The umbrella serves a different viewpoint as far as a tree where we can't, with certain types of trees and what have you, they are fuller. I just felt like that was a great point that was made by one of the citizens.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if there's so many different kinds of trees, if they could just be not blocking the view any more than the umbrellas, or staying, the low types of trees. Just feels like that, kind of taking that away might make it not look very nice, but.
I like the trees, but if it moves it in the right direction, I'm willing to vote for it without the trees.
What if we limit the height of the tree?
I mean, to be realistic, these are trees that we're going to plant pretty
bushes?
soon. They're going to be pretty small.
They will get blown over if they're too big. That's the inevitable. So they can't be big.
They'll be pretty small.
I mean, there's just a lot of other things that happen with a tree that's in a planter that's just sitting there is just so much extra stuff that could happen.
How about this? If you can give me the discretion to work this out with Wayne and you all decide after we have everything up, if you don't like it and it's not functioning well, we can change it.
Absolutely.
I
think
will
that's
amend my
great.
motion to approve the SEA proposal as written.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed?
I'm not voting.
Abstain.
Any abstentions? One.
I don't want to vote against the project, but I cannot support this process.
Right, so that's an abstention, I think. That's fine. So 3 in favor, 1 abstaining. Congratulations.
We'll work out the details.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next, scheduling a workshop with the Select Board and Planning Board.
Yes, so for a little while, the planning board has been interested in having a joint workshop with the select board. A lot of this has come out of work that they want to do around short-term rentals. So when there was discussion on, housing and affordability and availability of housing stock, they started to dig into that issue and do research and look at other municipalities and what they were doing and getting a better idea of, what percentage of Camden's housing stock is taken up by short-term rentals. So I think that they want to have a workshop with you to talk through all of that and get an idea from you of what sort of interest there is in addressing this as a policy issue through zoning. So that's one of the topics they wanted to have a workshop about. And I think the other one that could be helpful is the discussion around peers and getting some direction on moving forward with the Harbor Committee's recommendations, or if there's anything else the Select Board would like to do in terms of ordinance amendments that would need to be made.
Right, I mean, we said we were going to do that, right? Or there was a planning board recommendation or a request that we,
Yep. So my feeling is that this should be done after the new board is seated. So we're looking at the latter half of June. We should pick a date or two to suggest to the planning board.
Yes, and they agree with that too, that it would be better once it's everybody who's going to be here over the next year.
And there will be an agenda to that.
Yes. Yep.
Wanted to make sure, because that's a lot of topics to have on one meeting.
And I am thinking, because it's got to be a workshop and these are pretty weighty policy decisions,
Yeah.
you probably are going to have one on short-term rentals and then another one on peers. Probably not going to be able to do it all at once.
Let's start with, and my suggestion is we start with scheduling one. And I'm looking at June, the 27th, Tuesday is a select board meeting. The 20th, we have the 20th and the 27th as select board meetings, at least according to my phone. Is that correct?
Yeah, that one we change it so that we're not butting up against town meeting.
So what would be an appropriate date, Audra?
It doesn't have to be a Tuesday.
Doesn't have to be a Tuesday.
I'm kind of on autopilot.
Does the Wednesday, either the 21st or the 28th? Doable
Those
for
are
everyone?
Midcoast solid waste meetings
Yeah.
oftentimes, but
I'm going to be away on the 21st. Not that I have to be there, but 28th
probably
is a
should.
better day for me.
When is Midco Solid Waste meetings? Which Wednesday?
I see that Jeremy has his hand raised. Do you want?
Yeah, he will be able to help with scheduling the planning board.
Tuesdays were a good day because they're all reserved for. Select Board.
What is our meeting schedule in June? Do we know yet? What Tuesdays we're meeting?
So for June, it will be,
7th and
That's right, 7th is unusual, but yep.
yeah, the 7th, and then I think you're still going to have your,
6th, sorry, June 6th.
Well, we have one on a Wednesday because it follows the election. What day is the election?
The 13th.
So we'll have one on the 14th typically. So would it be the 14th and the 28th for June?
we still have it scheduled for the 6th and the 20th. Sorry, I'm looking at the calendar now. Okay.
6th and 20th in June.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the board was preferring, the planning board, I spoke with them today, I reached out to them. They were hoping mid-June. The only reason I think mid-June, and I appreciate everyone's got tight schedules. We're just thinking about November again, and we're butting up against the deadline to get ordinance and things together. So I think the sooner the better, to be honest, because, ultimately I think it's like ends up being the middle of August by the time we have to have things set for the November ballot. It might be end of August, but I think any of those times are good. The planning board generally, they're open I reached out to them again today, and they said generally during the day is preferable for them. If that works for you guys in the afternoon. But they didn't have any specific dates. They just said afternoons generally work.
But Jeremy, it needs to be after the election.
Yes.
So the election's on the
Yes.
14th, so
On the 13th, election's the
13th,
13th. Yeah.
sorry.
They agree completely with Tom that they think the new board would be best to work with the new board. going
So,
forward.
Jeremy, what about just throwing a date, June 21st? At that point, we've sworn the new board members in. And
Did you say you couldn't make that though, Tom?
I did. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.
so about the 28th.
28th is better for me. There's no doubt about it.
Work?
I will add, that would work fine for them. I will add, they did spend, like Audra said, they spent a fair amount of time on short-term rentals. We'll also have the LD 2003, which was the housing bill that got passed in the legislature last year. That needs to move forward. We're mandated to do something. So I think what we can do, and the board will from now until then, they meet with you, kind of work on some of this stuff just so that they're not wasting time. And I think that they're can at least get some information to you. And like Stephanie said about an agenda, I think if they bring, information to you as part of that agenda, that is helpful. We'll get that to you well ahead of time. It can be as productive as possible. I think that makes sense to me. They do, it's funny, Audra and I were talking about the piers and having the planning board jump into it again. And the planning board reached out and said, maybe we should talk piers too with the select board. So I think they'd like to probably jump at the pier thing sooner than later and just kind of bring up the harbor committee stuff, if that's okay with you all, and then move forward.
In the
They
same
do have the
meeting?
right to, go ahead.
In the same meeting? You think there'll be time in the same meeting?
I do, I don't
Are
think
you
it's gonna-
proposing
I
a
don't think-
5-hour meeting, Jeremy?
No, I think this could be an hour to 2 hours, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a real in-depth discussion. I think it's coming up to speed on where they are and their intent is and what your intent and thoughts are. I don't think we want to hash out this stuff in a meeting, like an initial meeting anyway.
Yeah, and this would not be public comments, correct? This would be open to the public, but not public comments. So I do think we can take a fairly aggressive.
Yeah, but remember that we might have new board members, and I think the 28th, because we need to bring them up to speed on that. It's really hard to jump into a select board workshop right the day after the election.
I mean, 28th is good. I agree. I do think that this is good for new members too. You can learn. I mean, that's how we've all become new members. We've gone to these workshops, we've gone to these meetings, and we've learned as we've gone.
Yeah, I mean, is there some material also that can be provided about sort of the basics of short-term rentals, what the issues are? It's good to,
Our plan.
all right.
That's the plan, is to give you as much information as possible ahead of that meeting, so it's productive.
Yeah, they're gonna write a report for the board on all the research they've done and background. So hopefully you'll be able to come in a little bit prepared in terms of what it is for background information, what it is they're asking you to do.
So if we have it on the 28th, can we make the materials available to the whole select board at least a week ahead of time?
Yes.
Sure.
Especially if we have new board members who have never served before.
That's not a problem at all.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Stephanie, just out of curiosity, I know that you have a more rigid schedule than I do at least. What's your availability on the 28th, the afternoon? Can you make an afternoon meeting?
I think we better put it in there if we're going to do it.
Okay. I would
Yeah.
suggest 3 p.m. I know I have something till 2:30 on that day, but I could make 3 p.m. personally, starting at 3 p.m.
I think with this enough notice, I would think the board can make that happen too. It's a month and a half out.
Fine with me.
I make a motion that we set a joint workshop with the planning board, June 28th, beginning at 3 p.m.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? 4-0.
Thank you.
Good job.
1 hour or
everyone.
2 hours? What is the,
I think 2. 2 will be good.
so 3 to 5 p.m. Okay.
Okay. The management reports and communications.
So I do not have a report prepared, and I'm struggling to remember the one item that I was going to inform you of off the top of my head.
It's
I'm pulling a
contagious.
Tom.
It's terrible. I hate that
I don't think
expression.
that Tom does that. I
So either, but
Beginning of the meeting. His fault.
I'll take it. I deserve it.
Okay. No report and no communication.
correct.
Okay. Select board reports. Anybody dying to go first?
There is a planning board meeting this upcoming the 4th. Hold on a moment. It's via Zoom, and I'll forward the link to all of you. And I believe the Zoom link is on the town website as well. May 4th from 5 to 8 p.m. I'm going to forward it now.
What's the topic there? Did they finish the Springbrook?
I'm going to ask Jeremy for that. It is not actually on the invitation, the topic.
He left.
I had trouble following along with their,
So quickly.
okay, we can find out later, but I've had a few comments from people that they've had trouble following the planning board schedule or I can't remember what somebody said. They couldn't find the videos online or they couldn't find something on the calendar. Is the Springbrook thing still going on? Does anybody know that?
Yes, ongoing with the board, I believe.
That hasn't been approved yet?
Yeah, not fully approved.
Okay. Stephanie, select board report.
My only report is the EMS meeting was postponed, so I'll bring an update on that when it happens.
So 2 things. I went to the library board of trustees, I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago. It was a good meeting. I think that I encourage people to attend the events that the library is putting. They're super interesting and they support the library. And I think this year they're going to need more support than ever. So check out their calendars because they're really good at advertising their events, but there's some really good stuff happening in this summer. Especially the Canvas series where we have the art fair. They've done a great job at selecting really interesting artists. And hopefully the weather will cooperate. And it's another one of those events that make Camden special. The second thing is the River Committee met today and they're going to start having social and public events. And the first one also, should the weather hold, is going to be at the farmers market on June 3rd. And so I also encourage everyone to check the website of the committee and look at the list of events that are happening. And there's a lot of good work that's going to be undertaken by kids in schools who are interested in the river biology and all kinds of things and projects that they're doing on their own, not with the committee, but there's a lot of activities around the river and a lot of questions and people involved. So it's really interesting to see the level of interest raising in understanding this asset we have, and that's it.
Okay, we did the Earth Day trash cleanup, had a moderate number of volunteers.
More notice?
Oh yeah, well, it's the same time every year, but it's, yeah, definitely more notice, and I would love more help getting all of that notice out in the future too. There's a spreadsheet though that has all of the road assignments that's online, and there are still a number of places in town that haven't gotten any cleanup. I noticed the Knox Mill public parking lot, like the Knowlton Street parking lots. None of Route 1 has been done. So anybody that would be up for taking a road assignment or a parking lot assignment, you can contact me or Marcy, and we will give you vests, pickers, trash bags, and you can just tell us, and you can leave the bag trash in the area where you clean it up. And yes, Stephanie?
May 6th, which is the Saturday, Marcy is doing a roadside cleanup meeting at the old Rockport Elementary School where the movie theater is. If anybody wants to show up, she's doing that.
She will try to give you a Rockport assignment if you do that, which is fine too, because we work together. But you can also, you can take those supplies to Camden if you want. So yeah, that's great. And we really should, there's so much trash all over the place. And a lot of people still don't know that it isn't anybody's job in the town, except for sort of the immediate downtown with the street sweeping stuff that they do. Nobody's job is to clean up the trash off of all of these back roads. And so if it doesn't get done by volunteers, it's just not going to get done. So that's my pitch. Then a quick thing, the Historic Resources Committee, one of the things that they have been looking at for quite some time is the comprehensive plan recommendation for a more beefed up historic preservation ordinance. And they presented this a few years back to the planning board, and it got kind of there's a lot of confusion around historic preservation ordinances because people generally have heard of something like that and heard that, their neighbor in Maryland couldn't paint their house, anything other than some historic pre-approved white color, or, things like that. Historic preservation ordinances are really the making of the town that passes them. So there's some minimum requirements to have like an official historic preservation ordinance. But it is a recommendation of the comprehensive plan, and it does, if we were to have an ordinance that regulated historic preservation in some way, it doesn't have to be a ban on demolition. It just would be a review board of some sort. It does open us up to a lot of grant opportunities, and so there's some different models out there. So at some point, they are going to be presenting information about that. And then they are also working on the historic self-guided walking tour for the Chestnut Street Historic District. That was done by a volunteer, and they're going to have some printed up soon. And they are also researching the Jacobs Avenue area as a potential historic district. And that's sort of been the result of wanting to highlight not just our sort of historically really affluent districts, but some of the historic areas like Jacobs Avenue that are all, they were a certain type of kit house, not the Sears kit they've figured out, but there's a lot of history there, and a couple of the members have done some really incredible research. So at some point, that may come before us too. And that's it from me. Anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn this select board meeting. I make a motion that we adjourn this select board meeting.
Second. I'll give
All
it to
in favor? Any discussion? Seeing none, 4-0. Okay, Thank you, everyone.